The first time she saw the tower, it did not feel like an arrival. It felt like a judgment. Mandy stood on the sidewalk, a tiny figure swallowed by the canyon of steel and glass, her new leather portfolio case clutched to her chest like a shield. Above her, the building, known to everyone simply as the Spire, pierced the low-hanging morning clouds, its mirrored skin reflecting a fractured, dizzying mosaic of the city. It was not a place of work, it was a monument to a cold, perfect ambition she could barely comprehend. The wind whipped down the street, a funnel of compressed air and urban chill, and she felt the crisp pages of her resume inside the case rustle, a faint, dry whisper that seemed to say, "You do not belong here." But she had to. This was the pinnacle, the dream spun through 4 years of lectures, all-nighters, and library-style coffee. A marketing coordinator at Vertex Dynamics. The words had tasted like victory when she'd read the offer letter in her sun-dappled, cramped student apartment. They tasted like ash now. The lobby was a cathedral. Soaring 50 feet to a ceiling of geometric skylights, it was a vacuum of sound, the marble floor swallowing the cautious clicks of her heels. People moved in streams, sharp suits, severe hairstyles, eyes fixed on phones or middle distance, their expressions carved from a granite of purpose. The air was scented with something clean, expensive, and faintly antiseptic, like money and regret. A security desk of onyx ran the length of one wall, staffed by unsmiling sentinels. She gave her name, her voice a reedy intrusion into the silence. A badge was printed, her photo grimly fluorescent. Mandy. Visitor. The lanyard felt like a noose. The elevator was a silent, soaring coffin. Through the glass wall, the city fell away, the people becoming ants, the cars silent toys. Her stomach lurched. On the 42nd floor, the doors sighed open onto a different world, the vast, open-plan heart of Vertex. A low, industrial hum of suppressed energy filled the space, the tap-tap of keyboards, the murmur of hushed conference calls, the software of climate control. It was a landscape of minimalist desks, stark monitor screens, and the relentless, sterile glow of LED lighting. No personal photos. No rogue potted plants. Just efficiency, rendered in shades of grey, white, and gunmetal blue. Her desk was an island at the edge of a sea of identical islands. She sat, the new chair sighing beneath her, and placed her portfolio case carefully on the clean, empty surface. She was a pebble dropped into a deep, still pond. She waited for the ripples, but none came. No one looked up. She was invisible, and the loneliness of that was more crushing than any welcome. He entered her consciousness not with a sound, but with a shift in the atmosphere. It was like a shadow passing over the sun. A sudden, subtle tightening in the postures of the people around her. A slight dip in the conversational hum. She looked up. He moved through the rows with a predator's quiet grace. Archie. She knew him instantly from the company website, but the photos failed to capture his physical sovereignty. He was in his mid-50s, tall and lean, his silver hair cut with a severity that accentuated the sharp, intelligent planes of his face. He wore a suit of a blue so deep it was almost black, the fabric whispering of impossible tailoring. His eyes, a pale, arctic blue, scanned the room as he walked, missing nothing. He was the undisputed king of this glass kingdom, and every subject knew it. Mandy looked down, suddenly frantic, pretending to be engrossed in the blank screen of her computer. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Don't come here. Don't see me. Please." The footsteps stopped. Beside her desk. She felt the weight of his gaze before she dared to meet it. Slowly, she raised her head. He was standing there, looking down at her, his hands loosely in his pockets. Up close, he was even more imposing. The lines on his face spoke of command, not laughter. But then his lips curved. It wasn't a broad smile, but a subtle, genuine warming of his features that reached his eyes, crinkling the skin at the corners. "You must be Mandy," he said. His voice was a revelation. It was low, resonant, a cello note in a room of tinny violins. It held a warmth that seemed utterly disconnected from the sterile environment. "We've been expecting you. Welcome to Vertex." He extended a hand. It was large, manicured, the skin smooth over prominent bones. She took it, her own hand disappearing inside his grasp. His grip was firm, dry, and surprisingly gentle. "Thank you, Mr. Archie. Please." He released her hand, but his eyes held hers. "That's quite all right. We're not formalists here. We value talent, fresh perspectives." His gaze swept over her desk, then back to her face, lingering for a beat too long on her eyes. "I have a feeling you're going to do very well here." A blush, hot and humiliating, ignited from her chest and flooded her neck and cheeks. She was a lighthouse of embarrassment. "Thank you. I hope so. I'm very eager to learn." "I'm sure you are." He gave a final, slow nod. "Make yourself at home. My door is always open." With that, he turned and continued his stately progress across the floor, leaving a vacuum of silence in his wake. For a full minute, Mandy didn't move. The ghost of his handshake seemed to linger on her skin. The CEO. The Archie had known her name. Had welcomed her personally. A dizzying cocktail of emotions swirled, flattery so intense it was vertigo, a profound sense of luck, and beneath it, a tiny, cold thread of something else, the unsettling intimacy of his prolonged gaze. She shook her head, burying the feeling. She was lucky. Incredibly, overwhelmingly lucky. The warmth of that welcome curdled with a speed that left her breathless. What she had mistaken for benevolent, avuncular interest revealed itself as a focused, obsessive spotlight. It began subtly. He would pass her desk on his way to the executive wing, pausing to ask a trivial question about the office temperature, the new coffee blend, her opinion on a generic industry trend. His eyes, however, never left her face. They were pale blue lasers, tracing the line of her jaw, the flutter of her pulse in her throat, the nervous way she wet her lips before speaking. Within a week, the pauses became visits. He would materialize beside her, a sudden monument of blue suit and silver hair, causing her to jump, her fingers stumbling on the keyboard. "How is the Henderson report coming along, Mandy?" She would stammer a reply, gesturing to her screen, but his gaze would be fixed on her profile, not the data. Good, he'd murmur, not really listening. "You have a very focused expression when you work. It's quite compelling." The compliments were landmines, disguised as roses. They left her flustered, unsure how to respond. A simple thank you felt inadequate. Silence felt rude. He began to orchestrate her presence. If she had a meeting scheduled in the West Wing, she would find him coincidentally heading in that direction, falling into step beside her, asking detailed questions about the meeting's purpose. He'd assign her tasks that required her to bring files directly to his office, a sanctum of dark wood, abstract art, and that same terrifying, expansive view. He would have her stand before his desk as he slowly reviewed the documents, his questions less about the content and more about her thought process, her feelings about the project. "You seem tired, Mandy," he said one afternoon, his chair swiveling to face her fully. "Are you getting enough sleep? This city can be ruthless on the young." The concern in his voice felt like a spider's web, soft, sticky, inescapable. "I'm fine, thank you," she'd say, her eyes on the intricate pattern of his Persian rug. "You must take care of yourself. Your well-being is an asset to Vertex." He said it like a decree. The office noticed. The change was glacial but undeniable. The friendly chatter from the cluster of desks near hers would die as she approached the break room. She'd catch fragments of sentences, hastily abandoned. Always with her, Archie's knew. She saw the looks, not of envy, but of a cold, clinical curiosity and a faint, unspoken pity. Sarah from accounts, a woman with kind eyes and a weary smile, once brushed past her at the printer. "Keep your head down, sweetie," she whispered, the words barely audible before she was gone, leaving Mandy frozen, a hot shame washing over her. She felt herself being split in two. There was Mandy the employee, trying desperately to prove her worth, to lose herself in datasets and campaign strategies. And then there was Mandy the object, constantly aware of the weight of a specific gaze, her body tensing in anticipation of his approach, her mind rehearsing neutral, professional responses to his intensely personal inquiries. She started wearing higher necklines, less noticeable makeup. She took different routes to the restroom. It was exhausting. One Tuesday, he called her into his office. Her stomach clenched. She entered to find him not at his desk, but standing by the wall of windows, a silhouette against the bruised purple and orange of the setting sky. "Close the door, Mandy." The soft click of the latch was the sound of a trap springing. The room was plunged into a quiet so deep she could hear the hum of the building's bones. "I've been reviewing the team structures," he began, not turning around. "The junior marketing cohort is lacking in decisive leadership. I'm creating a new role. Special Projects Liaison. It would report directly to me." Now he turned. His face was in shadow, but his eyes caught the last of the daylight, gleaming. "I want you for it." It was a meteoric rise. Impossible for someone with her tenure. The professional part of her brain screamed yes. This is it. The other part, the one that lived in her tightening throat and cold fingers, whispered a warning. "That's incredibly generous, Archie. But I've only been here a few weeks. Are you sure I'm ready? What about the others?" "I'm sure," he interrupted, his voice leaving no room for doubt. "I see potential others miss. A unique spark. This role requires discretion, and a direct line to me. It comes with a considerable adjustment to your compensation, of course." He named a figure that made her breath hitch. It was life-changing money. It was freedom, student loans erased, a real apartment, security. He walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. The scent of him, sandalwood, citrus, and something darker, like ozone after a storm, filled the space between them. "I invest in people I believe in, Mandy. I see a future for you here that is exceptional. Do you accept?" What choice did she have? To refuse would be to slap the hand of the king, to call his judgment into question, to brand herself as ungrateful and foolish. The fear of his displeasure was a colder, more practical terror than her personal unease. She swallowed, forcing a smile that felt like a crack in glass. "Yes. Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." His own smile was slow, satisfied. A collector who has just acquired a coveted piece. "We'll begin tomorrow. I have a dinner with some offshore partners on Friday. You'll accompany me. Consider it your first briefing." The restaurant, Le Sile, was aptly named. It occupied the top 3 floors of a rival tower, a constellation of crystal, star-white linen, and soft, golden light that made everyone look both beautiful and faintly unreal. Mandy had spent 2 hours and a terrifying portion of her meager savings on a simple black dress, elegant but undeniably conservative. She felt like a child playing dress-up in a temple. Archie was waiting at the bar, sipping a neat whiskey. He saw her and stood, his eyes performing that same slow, comprehensive scan. A flicker of something, approval, crossed his face. "Mandy, you look appropriate." The word was a pinprick. She had hoped for professional. Appropriate felt like a rating. "Thank you. Our guests are running late. Let's have a drink at our table." There was no our table. There was a private alcove, shrouded by a curtain of delicate beads, with a single, intimate table for 2. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning traced her spine. "The partners?" she asked, her voice thin. "Their flight was delayed. A storm over the Atlantic. They'll join us for dessert, perhaps." He held her chair, his hand briefly grazing her bare shoulder as she sat. The touch was electric, a jolt of unwelcome intimacy. He took his seat opposite her, his presence filling the small space. A waiter appeared, poured champagne without being asked. Archie raised his glass. To new beginnings. And to recognizing rare quality. She clinked her glass against his, the crystal singing a high, pure note. The champagne tasted like anxiety. The dinner was a masterpiece of excruciating intimacy. He asked no questions about business, about her new role. Instead, he dissected her life. He wanted to know about her childhood home, the scent of her mother's cooking, her first heartbreak, her most cherished university memory. He listened with a frightening intensity, his eyes never leaving her face, as if he were memorizing her for a later performance. He shared anecdotes of his own, boarding schools in Switzerland, early deals in Hong Kong, the loneliness of first success. They were stories designed to impress, to illustrate a life of magnificent scale, but they felt rehearsed, like exhibits in a museum of himself. The promised business partners never materialized. As a server cleared the dessert plates, she had eaten nothing, the food like ash on her tongue. Archie leaned back, studying her. The performance was over. The air between them changed, thickening with unspoken intent. You have been remarkably poised tonight, Mandy. A natural in any setting. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his jacket and withdrew a small, black velvet box. It was the size of a matchbox, but it seemed to suck all the light from the room into its plush darkness. He placed it on the table between them, directly on top of the ghost of her uneaten dessert. A small token. To mark the occasion of your promotion. Her mouth went dry. Archie, no. I couldn't. It's not necessary. Open it. The command was gentle, but absolute. With trembling fingers, she lifted the lid. Nestled inside, on a bed of white silk, was a bracelet. But it was not a simple chain. It was a fluid ribbon of solid gold, intricately woven into an elaborate, serpentine pattern, clasped with a diamond that caught the candlelight and fractured it into 100 icy sparks. It was ancient, Byzantine, staggeringly valuable. It was the kind of object one saw behind bulletproof glass in museums. It's too much, she whispered, horror-struck. This is. I can't accept this. He reached across the table. His hand closed over hers, which was still holding the box. His skin was warm, his grip firm, imprisoning her hand and the obscene gift together. I want you to have it. It's a bonus. A sign of my faith in you. She tried to pull her hand back, but he held fast. His thumb stroked the back of her knuckles, a slow, possessive caress. Please, take it. Wear it. It would suit you. Gold against your skin. His voice dropped to a husky murmur, meant only for her, cutting through the muted clatter of the restaurant. I have wanted to give you something beautiful since the moment I saw you at that little desk, looking so wonderfully out of place. So fresh. So untouched by all this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing the restaurant, the city, his entire empire. The roar started in her ears, a white noise of panic and a shocking, searing shame. Because amidst the terror, a tiny, corrupted part of her, the part that had been flattered by his attention, the part that saw the bracelet as a symbol of a success she'd craved, stirred with a dark, unwelcome thrill. It was the thrill of being chosen, of being seen as precious by a man who owned precious things. The disgust that followed was immediate and violent, turning her stomach. She wrenched her hand free, the box clattering onto the tablecloth. No, the word was stronger than she felt. I appreciate the thought, Archie, truly. But this isn't appropriate. It's a business relationship. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes cooled, the Arctic blue hardening. Is that what you think this is? A simple business relationship? He leaned forward, the candlelight carving deep shadows into his face. Mandy, look around you. I brought you to LaSalle. I've promoted you beyond your wildest dreams. I am offering you a world. Do you think I do that for every eager graduate? He let the question hang, a poisonous cloud between them. Then he softened his tone, a predator shifting tactics. I'm a lonely man, Mandy. I have built empires, but I have built very little that is warm. You bring a light into that sterile office. I find myself thinking of you, of your potential, of the woman you are becoming. This, he tapped the velvet box, is just a beginning. An expression of my sincere interest. The manipulation was masterful, weaving flattery, pathos, and threat into a single, inescapable net. Lonely man. A light. Sincere interest. The subtext screamed in the silence. You owe me. I need to go home, she said, her voice trembling. I'm not feeling well. For a long moment, he just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, he nodded, a single, gracious dip of his head. Of course. The night has been overwhelming. I'll drive you. No. I mean, I'll get a cab. It's fine. Nonsense. He was already signaling for the check. My driver is downstairs. It's the least I can do. It was not an offer. The car was a Volt on wheels, silent and dark, the partition between them and the driver a solid wall of privacy. The city lights slid past the tinted windows, streaks of meaningless color. Archie sat beside her, not touching her, but his presence was a physical pressure. The velvet box was a burning coal in her clutch. "You're very quiet," he said, his voice a soft rumble in the dark. "I'm tired. We should discuss your first project. It requires a nuanced understanding. My apartment has the necessary files. We'll stop there briefly. It will only take a moment." The trap, so beautifully baited, snapped shut with a final, silent click. Protest died in her throat. What could she say? "No, I don't want to go to your apartment." He was her CEO. He was explaining a work project. To refuse was to be irrational, unprofessional, to confirm every suspicion that she was not up to the special role he'd created. She said nothing. Her silence was his consent. The apartment occupied the entire top floor of a pre-war building that whispered of old, unassailable money. The elevator opened directly into a foyer larger than her entire apartment. The space beyond was a study in curated minimalism. Walls of raw concrete, floors of wide plank oak, vast windows showcasing a panoramic, sovereign's view of the city's glittering spine. A single, massive abstract painting, a slash of crimson on a field of grey, dominated one wall. There were no family photos, no knickknacks, no books with cracked spines. It was a stage set for a very specific, very powerful life. It was utterly lifeless. "Please," he said, shrugging off his coat and draping it over a sculptural chair that looked like it had never been sat in. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get the files. A drink. Whiskey. Wine. Water, please." Her voice was a stranger's. He returned with a crystal tumbler of water and a thick, leather-bound folder. He placed the water on a low quartz table and held the folder. "It's sensitive. Competitor analysis. Potential acquisition targets. You understand this cannot leave this room." He gestured to a long, low sofa. "Sit. Let me walk you through it." She perched on the edge of the sofa, spine rigid. He sat close beside her, not touching, but the heat of his body was palpable. He opened the folder. The pages inside were dense with financial data, charts, graphs. He began to speak, his finger tracing lines of numbers, but his words were a distant buzz. She couldn't focus. All she could feel was his proximity, the scent of him now mingling with the faint, clean smell of the apartment, the profound, screaming wrongness of the situation. His voice trailed off. He closed the folder with a soft thump and set it aside. The sudden silence was deafening. He turned to face her, one arm stretched along the back of the sofa behind her head. "You're not listening, Mandy." "I'm sorry, It's all right." His gaze was soft, but intent. "The files were just a pretext. You knew that, didn't you?" She stared at him, unable to speak, unable to breathe. "This," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur, "is the real evaluation. The final one. To see if you have the fortitude for the world I'm offering you. It's not just about marketing reports. It's about loyalty, discretion, understanding the unspoken agreements that fuel true success." He reached out and touched a strand of her hair, tucking it behind her ear. His fingertips brushed her cheek. She flinched as if scalded. "Don't be afraid," he whispered, his face moving closer. His eyes searched hers, looking for the complicity he'd been cultivating for weeks. "This is This is the natural progression. Talent recognized. Beauty appreciated. Power shared." The last word was a breath against her lips. All the girls who rise quickly understand this. It's the final interview. Revulsion, cold and pure, finally overrode the fear. She shoved against his chest, scrambling backwards along the sofa. "Stop it. This isn't an interview. This is wrong." He didn't look angry. He looked mildly disappointed, like a teacher with a slow student. "Wrong. I'm offering you everything. Security. Influence. A life most people can't even dream of. All I ask in return is a little companionship. A little warmth in this cold place." His hand gestured around the sterile apartment. Stay tonight. Prove your commitment. And tomorrow, you won't be a liaison. You'll be a vice president. A salary that will make your head spin. Your own office. A future without limits. He laid it out like a contract. Her body, her autonomy, in exchange for a title and a number. The monstrous clarity of it was almost a relief. She stood up, her legs unsteady. No. I'm leaving. He stood too, his expression shifting. The patient hunter was gone, replaced by something harder, more imperious. Leave, and you leave everything. The job. The promotion. The future. You walk out that door, and you are nothing. A failed, naive girl who couldn't handle real opportunity. Your name in this industry will be mud. I'll see to it. The threat was naked now. The velvet glove was off, revealing the iron fist. The fear returned, a tidal wave. She saw it all, the revoked offer, the blacklisting, the pitying looks from former classmates, the crushing weight of student debt with no way out. Her dream turned into a weapon against her. In that moment of sheer, paralyzing terror, a last, desperate defense surfaced. It was her deepest secret, a private part of herself she'd never planned to share, least of all with him. She blurted it out, a Hail Mary pass to shock him into seeing her as a person, to appeal to some shred of buried decency. You don't understand. I'm a virgin. The word echoed in the vast, cold space, vulgar and small. He froze. His eyes widened. For one glorious, fleeting second, she saw genuine shock. And something else, a flicker of what might have been hesitation, or even a bizarre kind of respect. Her heart leapt. It worked. He'll stop. He has to. Then, the shock dissolved. It didn't morph into anger or retreat. It transformed into something infinitely more horrifying, a rapt, awestruck avarice. His eyes lit up with a fanatic's gleam. He took a step closer, his gaze traveling over her body as if seeing her for the first time, as if she were a lost Da Vinci painting suddenly authenticated. A virgin, he breathed, the word reverent on his tongue. How extraordinary. How utterly pristine. A slow, possessive smile spread across his face. That changes everything, Mandy. That makes you not just special, but unique. A treasure in a world of copies. He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek, not touching, but claiming the space. I've never had a virgin before. It's a profound responsibility. A gift. Her blood turned to ice. Her truth, her most vulnerable secret, had not humanized her. It had commodified her further. She wasn't a person refusing him. She was a rare artifact whose value had just skyrocketed. The last vestige of hope died. He moved then, to finally claim his prize, his hands coming up to frame her face. The touch was the trigger. A fury, white-hot and purifying, exploded from her core. It burned away the fear, the shame, the flattery, the calculated pity. It was the fury of a soul realizing its own pricelessness in the face of utter devaluation. Her arm, acting on a primal instinct of self-preservation, swung in a tight, fierce arc. The slap connected with his cheek with a sound like a gunshot in the silent apartment. It wasn't a girlish swipe. It was a solid, forceful impact that jerked his head to the side. Time stopped. He stumbled back a step, his hand flying to his face. The imprint of her fingers bloomed red against his pale skin. The powerful CEO, the collector, the man who owned worlds, stood utterly stunned. The mask of urbane control and hungry desire shattered. For several seconds, he just stared at her, his arctic blue eyes wide with incomprehension. He looked like a child who had been caught in a terrible, inexplicable act. Then, the shock melted away, not into rage, but into a profound, devastating emptiness. The anger never came. The color drained from his face, leaving him ashen and suddenly old. The imposing stature seemed to crumple in on itself. He lowered his hand, staring at the palm as if it held the answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was shattered glass, barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Mandy. He looked at her, and his eyes were wells of a loneliness so deep and absolute it was terrifying to behold. That was despicable. He turned away, walking unsteadily to the wall of windows, his back to her. He placed a hand on the cold glass, leaning his forehead against it, a portrait of defeat against the glittering city. "This life," he said, his voice muffled. "It's a beautiful, empty shell. I have spent decades building a perfect machine. I can buy anything, influence anyone, but I cannot buy a single moment of real connection." He turned his head, his profile etched with despair against the light. "You walked in, and you were so alive. So full of a future I had already bartered away for stock options and board approvals. You smelled of rain and cheap shampoo and possibility. I thought if I could show you my world, give you pieces of it, you might look at me. Not at the CEO. Not at the bank account. At the man. The lonely, foolish man inside this ridiculous suit." A dry, shuddering sob escaped him. "But I don't know how to be that man. I only know how to negotiate. To acquire. So I tried to acquire you. With a title. With a bracelet. With promises." He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "And when you showed me your truth, your innocence, I only saw it as a rarer commodity. I am a monster. A hollow, pathetic monster." He was laid bare before her, a king in a castle of his own despair. The complexity of it was staggering. This wasn't a cartoon villain. This was a human ruin, a soul so corroded by isolation and the corrupting ease of power that love had become indistinguishable from possession and desire from conquest. A tidal wave of pity, fierce and unwanted, threatened to pull her under. She saw the little boy who'd traded humanity for success and was now drowning in the emptiness he'd created. He misread the silence, the softening of her stance. He turned fully, a faint, desperate hope flickering in his tear-bright eyes. He took a tentative step toward her, his hand rising, not in demand, but in a pleading gesture. "Mandy, please, can you ever, is there any way to?" The sight of that reaching hand, even in supplication, was the final catalyst. His loneliness was a tragedy, but it was not her crime. His brokenness did not give him the right to break her. His regret did not erase her violation. The pity crystallized into a diamond-hard certainty. She looked at him, the silver hair, the expensive suit hanging on a frame of utter desolation, the raw, pathetic hope on his face, and she felt nothing but a clean, cold finality. Without a word, she walked to the quartz table and picked up her clutch. She walked toward the foyer, her steps echoing on the hard floor. At the elevator, she pressed the call button. He stood frozen in the center of his vast, empty living room, watching her go, a statue of regret. The doors slid open with a soft chime. She stepped inside and turned to face him one last time. The doors began to close, narrowing the view of him, this broken king in his glass prison. Just before the gap vanished, she spoke, her voice clear, calm, and carrying across the distance. "I quit." The doors sealed shut. The descent was silent, swift. In the mirrored walls of the elevator, she saw her own reflection. Pale, eyes wide, a red mark on her wrist where she'd gripped her bag too tightly. But her chin was high. The lobby was deserted. The night doorman nodded, his face impassive. She pushed through the heavy brass doors and emerged into the city. The air was a physical shock, cool, damp, and thick with the smells of wet pavement, distant garbage, and diesel. It was real. It was uncurated. It was free. She took a deep, gulping breath, filling lungs that felt like they hadn't worked properly in weeks. She began to walk, with no destination. The weight was gone. The crushing weight of his gaze, the oppressive weight of the office politics, the heavier, more insidious weight of her own silent complicity. With every step, she felt lighter. She had no job. No income. No plan. The practical terror of tomorrow was a real, looming spectre. But it was a spectre of her own making. It was uncertainty, not servitude. It was a blank page, not a pre-written contract. She had traded a gilded, suffocating cage for the vast, terrifying, and exhilarating sky. She walked until her feet ached, until the first hints of dirty dawn lightened the eastern sky. She found herself on a bridge, looking down at the dark, restless river cutting through the heart of the sleeping city. The spire was still visible in the distance, a dark needle against the grey. She opened her clutch. The black velvet box was still there. She took it out, held it in her palm for a moment, feeling its weight. Then, without ceremony, she drew back her arm and flung it, as hard as she could, out over the railing. It spun, a tiny dark star, and was swallowed by the murky water below. The diamond's last spark was extinguished instantly. Mandy turned her back on the tower and walked toward the rising sun, her shadow stretching long and thin behind her. She was unemployed. She was unknown. She was free. And in the raw, hopeful, terrifying silence of the new morning, that freedom was the only sound, and it was a symphony.